goal is to bring you your next favorite band. Day 4 of our Musikfest Daily Livestreams, broadcasting from Godfrey Daniels, we have Blair Crimmins and the Hookers. Hello everybody, welcome to the show. I am your host, Philip Reese, and I am joined by guest co-host,
Blair Crimmins.
And you are to...
Your next favorite band.
Nice. I never know what's going to happen when I point to the person.
Yeah.
So far, it's been 100%. But I'm always waiting for them to be like, I don't know what to say. But thank you so much for coming on. I mean, like, let me tell you, like, I'm going to set this up right now. Super hot out. You're traveling and gigging. You know, you're living out of, you know, a van and hotel rooms, and you don't need some, you know, Fakakta podcast to ask for your time while you could be resting. But you always say yes. You're always very kind and generous with your time and your talent. But not only that, today, you and the entire band are going to come on, and then you have all of your instruments in the room.
Instruments, yeah, we're going to play it too.
And we're going to play a song live. And I was blown away by your generosity with all of that, because these are not small instruments. Even this one weighs how much?
God, I don't know. It is heavy.
It is. That would take somebody out.
It's probably 30-some pounds.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's like, that might not look heavy, but the tenor banjo is a implement.
No, it's great to be here, and we get to strum a little bit and warm up and for the show tonight.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Again, thank you to everyone and for doing this. But what we always like to do to start is kind of talk about the picks of the day. So here for day 4, Monday, August the 5th, fave of the day, shocker, Blair Crimmins and the Hookers.
You really love us.
Let's stick with the music, and let's get to some Blair Crimmins, right? I think this will be interesting for people. The closing show, again, back to your generosity, way back when this show started, like, it's actually your fault that I even started this thing.
My fault.
It is. Well, if anybody hates the show, it's actually, you can blame Blair, because here's why. With 0 to my, resume, didn't even have my own show. And I asked you backstage, I was like, would you ever do an interview? And you were like, yeah. And I was like, I don't have a show. I don't have anything. But because you said yes, like, I
had to make a show.
I had to basically go find that happen. And so you were interview number 1 for me, and that went well. And then I actually had the guts to ask other musicians that same year, because I was like, well, crap, if I've got one, can't just have one episode.
Man, I'm glad we got the ball rolling, because it's really cool what you're doing and getting exposure for all the original groups at Musikfest every year.
Oh yeah, it's definitely about
that,
original music and independent artists in particular. But yeah, no, I mean, it's actually, that's part of it is
happy to help.
You're saying yes to that, and then we had I thought was a pretty solid interview, so I was like, let's do this again and again, and here we are. But yeah, that's there. And then the other piece of that was, after, maybe like 15, 20 episodes, I was like, I kind of want to make some opening show credits and closing show credits and stuff, and take it that like next level of seriousness. And I was like, I'd love to use It's All Over Now as my closing show music. And then I kind of brought it to you already edited to make it sound like an instrumental. And you were like, yeah, that's cool. So again, you let me use your music for the closing show music, and it's just this subtle joke for myself that no one else even probably knows, is it's called It's All Over Now.
Yeah.
But here's the actual, music that, we'll be able to kind of speak over. But it also is a hilarious video. So I want to hear some more about the video. But it has a cool, funny opening, and then it gets into the music. But here's It's All Over Now by Blair Crimmins and the Hookers. So for those of you that may be listening to this music for the first time ever, the category would be this kind of like Dixieland hot jazz, turn of the century New Orleans style type?
Yeah.
Is that where you would put it?
Yeah, hot jazz, early swing. Sometimes we throw the word ragtime in there.
Right.
Just a conglomeration of all the influences that we have from the 20s, 30s, and even 40s.
And while you occasionally play some covers from that time frame, almost all of your set is your own original music, just in this style, which I think is sometimes maybe lost on some people who are like Musikfest festival type atmosphere. They just walk up, hear this awesome music, and they're probably in their minds just thinking you're doing music from that time period.
Yeah, and sometimes that works in our favor. We get hired a lot of times to be the just the 20s band, and they don't know that we're playing.
And why
stuff.
care?
Right.
If it's good music,
they just want the vibe, and that's cool.
And then about this,
fight.
the song you wrote is somewhat in jest around, going from a single person to being married.
Yeah, I wrote it shortly after I got engaged, and my wife is a comedian, so I didn't want to. I've written more traditional love songs for her, but I really wanted, I knew she would really appreciate something with more of a sense of humor. And she even helped write a couple of the lines in this song. There's a line about my honeydew list is now, my little black book's now a honeydew list. And then just fighting over covers. That's all we're doing now is fighting over covers.
Yeah, that's like the big breakdown part. It's so cool. And then tell us more about the video. It's just such a hilarious take on everything.
The puppet thing, I had, I've always had a big obsession with the Muppets and the Fraggle Rock and all that stuff. And the music that came out of those shows is oftentimes early swing, like what we play. So I had in the back of my mind to do some kind of puppet video at some point, and then I actually got approached by the local puppeteer who was doing a video series with musicians and puppets. And it was he sent me a couple of example videos, and it was all very, very wholesome. And I was like, well, that's not us. We're not doing the PBS.
Did you read the name of the band?
Yeah, so I was like, what if we changed it up and we took the puppets out for a night on the town and got really debaucherous with them? And I said, I love it. And it turned into a way bigger production than what he was originally doing. It was kind of just a one camera shot. And we just took over a couple levels of the Star Bar in Atlanta, Georgia, and got as many extras as we could to come over, and called on everybody we could to act. Standing on the bar right here. Obviously, the ceiling is a little low for standing on the bar, but we still
figured out a way to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent stuff. And we actually got the whole song in pretty much. There was one other song. What I love doing is the other thing you do that's brilliant is you take modern songs and cover them in this style. So obviously we talked about covering Jelly Roll Morton or something like that from the time period, but to take something like Psycho Killer and turn it into what you do.
Yeah, I mean, I love that kind of music. I love classic rock and 80s music and new wave and punk and all that stuff too. So, I mean, Psycho Killer I've been playing for years before I started the Hookers too.
Right.
So for some reason, it just has kind of followed me around as this cover, and it translated so well into this
Oh, it totally is. It's one of those
jungle swing songs.
And sometimes you're listening to these, and before you get to the chorus, you're going, "Wait, I know this song. What is it?" Because it's your brain is going, "Wait, some things sound familiar and others don't."
I see the look on everybody's face in the audience, like when they're putting it together.
Yeah. So here's Psycho Killer by Blair Crimmins and the Hookers.
Can't seem to face up to the facts. I'm tense and nervous, can't relax, can't sleep, bed's on fire. Don't touch me, I'm a real live wire. Psycho killer, yes they say. Fa 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 fa, yeah. Run away.
So forgive my ignorance, and if this is like oversimplifying it, but it must take a while to take a modern song and translate it to this style. That can't be like the easiest thing in the world.
It takes a real long time if you're me. Right.
Right.
Because I used to write arrangements. Now I try and get somebody that's better at than me to do it and much quicker. But yeah, it always took me a while to write out the parts for these kind of things.
Yeah. So it's bottom line is.
But you have to find. I mean, once you figure out where the direction, what the overall feel of the song is,
Sure.
how you're going to reinterpret it, the rhythm behind it, how you're going to change it. Then they can't all just be swings, just like the generic
Sure.
swing beat. So you try and experiment in what works with this tune.
Right. And then it clicks, and then everything falls in behind it.
Yeah.
I could see that. But it's brilliant stuff. It's pivot to the interview. Welcome to the show.
Oh,
Blair Crimmins.
Yeah. Oh, thank
You're
you.
no longer a co-host. You're now a guest.
All right. Now I'm nervous.
But yeah, so we touched on obviously the sound, and kind of like the vibe and everything about that. Like you lean all the way in, so obviously you have the sound, you have the orchestration, and so on. Then you also wear you're in full on stage. You're embracing that entire kind of character.
God, that was like half the appeal of the music for me. Was getting to wear those
the cool clothes. Yeah, yeah, for sure.
I mean, no, I've always enjoyed wearing that kind of attire. So yeah, it just goes with the vibe.
Yep. Yeah, very sure. And we've I think you've been on the show like 4 times. People can go check out those prior interviews if they really want like the deep dive into the origin story of Blair Crimmins and the Hookers. I wanted to jump and make this one more about the instruments.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, so these are gorgeous too. Like that's the one part about these types of instruments they're just pretty to look at.
Right. Well, they came out at a time where more was more.
Right.
Instead of.
Yeah, the back is. I just noticed that yesterday for the first time. And who sees that but you?
Just for me.
Yeah,
exactly. And then also there's a carving. I don't know if you can see, but
the ornate carving on there.
The heel is carved, and that was really popular for these types of banjos.
Right.
Pre World War II era banjos. They're called. This one's it's a tenor banjo.
Right.
It's a 4-string, and that was the 4-string banjo was king at the time.
Sure.
Up until the evolution of bands where they started having amplification.
Yeah.
So this banjo was placed in the back of the room next to the drums to bang out
more of the rhythm
really
section.
Really loud. Yeah, just chunking away in the rhythm section. And in some of those old recordings, you can't even really tell what chord they're playing. You just hear this ambient, this ambient.
And you had even we were talking about this last night, which I thought was interesting. On the recordings, it sounds different than what's actually being played.
Yeah. I mean, they were doing their best at that time to get the sound onto the wire or whatever they were recording on.
Right.
But when you talk to people that played during that time, for instance, I mean, it sounds when you listen to an old recording, you're gonna hear like. And that's me bouncing my fingers up and down on the string, so it mutes between each strum.
Oh wow, yeah.
But and that's what it sounds like they're doing on like Louis Armstrong's Hot 5 recordings. But in actuality, what they were doing is, and you could even kind of hear the compression in here too.
Yeah.
What happens? They strum, they let it ring all the way out, but on the record, all you could hear is that attack.
That one, probably the peak of it.
Yeah. So if you hear any real like authentic Dixieland bands that play it the way that it was played before, the banjo technique is a little different.
So that's the kind of, to use a word maybe for a non-music trained person, it's more staccato is what you're hearing, but it's more, I don't know what the other reverse of that would be, but like it's not as staccato as what it should be in person.
No, yeah. And then I mean, same with the guitars too. And when they had sessions with the guitar player would have to walk up, in front of the band to do his solo, and then drop back out.
Right.
Which isn't really convenient to do on a stage these days. Everybody has.
And again, like we talked about, these are heavy instruments, and you're walking around behemoths like we have a stand-up bass that we'll be talking about in a second, and drum kits and horn sections, and it's not exactly you could get hit in the head with some.
Right. I mean, it's just it's a matter of how authentic do you need to be?
Sure.
And just to achieve the sound. But for me, I got my first 4-string because I was listening to those albums, and I was just a guitar player at the time, and I was writing some of these numbers and realized that the guitar just wasn't the sound that I was looking for. So I took up the tenor banjo just so I could play this type of music with this band.
Certainly.
And now I play. Probably 75% of the show is on tenor banjo. Maybe more. I pick up the guitar still too.
Yeah.
But a lot of it's on the banjo. like I said, this was the most, this is the predominant type of banjo during that era in the big band. And then as the guitar players found amplification, and more band leaders started hiring guitar players, and you have this time, and I guess maybe in the 30s and 40s, where the banjo players are trying to get those guitar gigs.
Right.
So they've got a 4-string guitar, and they go and play there. And then the guitar players want to pick up the banjo gigs, so they've got 6-string banjos. You see a lot of those. I mean, they still make them, but you usually find them in antique stores, and they're all old and and unplayable. But,
so what is the other type of banjo called?
The 5-string banjo.
Yeah.
The 5-string banjo is what's played for bluegrass music,
and that's more finger picked, right?
Popularized by Earl Scruggs.
Sure.
And that's finger picks.
Like
you
on
have
all
individual
your
finger picks, and it gives that really like lightning fast sort of.
Yeah, it sounds like a true locomotive going.
Yeah.
It's the person I always think of oddly as Steve Martin. But like that's like funny is like.
Yeah, he's a great finger picker. Right. And the fifth string on the 5-string banjo has one short string on it that's it's an open droning type string, and it's tuned in a open tuning, so that means it sounds like a chord just when you hit strum it. This sounds more like what you hear when an orchestra is tuning up, like the sound of violin.
Yeah.
And there's also there's the tenor banjo, which is tuned in fifths, and then there's also the plectrum banjo, which is a 4-string, which is a little bit longer in the neck, and that one actually is tuned to an open tuning. Which they're very similar, but you could tell that if you listen, you could tell the difference. The long neck makes the plectrum banjo a little bit more slinky, like sounding, and this one's just very, very punchy.
Yeah, I just saw somebody perform, and they had almost a ukulele banjo, like it was a
banjolele.
Yeah.
I got one of those.
Oh, that's It was like, I pulled that out, and I was like, "What's like a?"
Yeah.
I thought it was almost a gag.
Yeah.
Until he started playing, and it was legit. But just by sight alone, I was like, someone shot it with a shrink ray, and brought a banjo down to the baby size. But it sounded cool.
They're cool. Yeah. I mean, they were prominently used by people like Cliff Ukulele Ike Edwards, who played funny tunes.
Yeah.
Like.
And I guess that's
Tiptoe Through the Tulips and all that stuff,
Yeah. It's like similar to like the opposite of that was I saw somebody play a bass saxophone, and it was like comically large. I was like, oh my gosh, it's bigger than a human.
Yeah, climb on a ladder to play one note. Yeah.
But it sounded amazing because they were the bassist. It was a 3-piece, and it was a drummer, a slide guitarist, and then a bass saxophone. And it was such a cool sound.
I'd check that out.
Yeah.
I love that band Morphine was one of my
favorites. And that's what they had. A lot of it kind of sounded like
Uh-huh.
that. But this band is called the Hootin' Hollers.
Check it out.
Yeah, I would definitely check them out for sure. But yeah, thank you. I would love to keep chatting at all, but I want to make sure we cycle everybody through.
More instruments.
So should we do horns? Cool.
Bring the horns up.
Yeah, how exciting.
Brought some toys too.
I know, I can't wait to talk about these things. Thank you. Again, this is, to me, I hope people are getting as much a kick out of this as I am. I love learning about all this stuff.
Yeah.
So, first let's introduce everybody. You can give some backstory on like how you got to be a hooker.
So my name's Ryan. I've been playing with Blair since 2017, and I met the saxophone player just playing around town in Atlanta, and then he hit me up one time, and he said, "Hey, would you have any interest in playing in this band, Blair Crimmins and the Hookers?" I was like, the what? The who? Like,
how do I tell my
like,
mom?
And then I got connected with Blair, and then it was a good match, and then I've been playing ever since.
That's so cool.
But it's really funny because now, like, my dad thinks it's hilarious. He's like, my son's a hooker.
I think the other thing that happens is you start to forget the word has a different connotation. So sometimes I'll talk about the band, and then the other person's like, "You're bringing who on the show?"
Yeah.
And you can tell they either really want to tune in or they aren't going to. But anyway, yeah. So thank you for joining.
Hi, I'm Mike. I'm new. I'm subbing in.
Right.
But I met most of the members of the band a couple years ago.
Sure.
Maybe. I've been subbing in here or there.
Yep.
Known Ryan for a long time. Played in Atlanta a ton. And,
I was going to ask. So from Atlanta as well.
Yes.
Yeah. So I got to think, is there like like a sub community of brass players, like who you all know each other and kind of keep in touch, that type of thing?
Yes.
I would think so. Yeah.
Big time.
Yeah. Cool. So yeah, let's talk about the instruments. So we have a trumpet, and we have a slide trombone.
Yep.
So if you want, like, why don't you say, like, how did you find your path to this instrument? Like, what did it pick you? Was there a circumstance? Did you know it ever since you were a kid? I want to play that.
I have a very specific story about
Love it.
this. I was on a family vacation. Wasn't a very good family vacation. It was like, but we for whatever reason we decided to go to like Silver Dollar City in Branson, Missouri. So we were on this road trip, and we were in this like crappy little motel. And interestingly enough, it was the 1996 Olympics.
Okay.
And it was the opening ceremony. We watched it on this little tiny TV in our motel, and there were trumpets lined around the stadium. And I didn't know what a trumpet was, but like I just remember seeing, because my family, like, or at least my immediate family, no musicians in there really.
Oh, interesting.
So like, but I saw the trumpets lined around, and I was like, dude, what are those things? And then I think my mom was like, oh, that's a trumpet. And like, I was like in 4th grade at the time.
Right.
So like 2 years later when band came up, it wasn't even a question. I was like, I got to play that thing.
That's
so
awesome.
It was like, I don't know what it was. Like 4th grade, I saw it in the Olympic ceremony, and I was like, that's the thing.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, so
That's what I mean. Like sometimes it just calls to you right away, and other times it's like an accidental thing. I was talking to somebody at an interview where they were trying to explain the saxophone, but they couldn't think of the word of it, so they were in the first day of like, music class where they're picking instruments, and he's like, it's that thing, and it's, you kind of hold it like this and you play it, and they went clarinet, and he goes, yes, that's it. And so he goes with his dad with the little slip of paper to the music rentals company, and then they come out with that, and he said, as soon as the box came out, I knew something was messed up. And then the dad was like, too late, I already paid for this one, guess what, you're now a clarinetist. But it's just funny how sometimes that happens too. But did you ever hear I just saw this recently, a stand-up comedian was just like, I have a problem with the trumpet. Have you seen this one at all? Okay, you should check it out. I'm sure you could Google search this and it would come up.
Yeah.
But he's like, 3 buttons, and it plays all the notes. I call bullshit. Like, it was just anyway, it went on from there, but it was just like this really funny thing where like compared different instruments.
To be honest, I don't know how it works either. So.
It's a marvel. But yeah, so how did you find your way to the slide trombone?
I wish I had as cool of a story. But no, I started in band in elementary school, back when that was more, I guess, of a normal thing.
Sure.
And I really wanted to play saxophone, but I think so did everyone else.
Right,
so
right, yes.
There wasn't really enough
for some
to go
reason,
around.
that's like the major draw. It's so
right,
weird.
yeah.
80s music just killed it for everybody.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So I tried it, and I was horrible. It was not good at all. But my second choice on the list was trombone, because I thought it was kind of funny.
Yeah.
And
is there a non-slide trombone, or is it only a trombone is this?
There's a valve trombone.
Okay.
It was historically used a lot more in the 18th century.
Sure.
But and 19th centuries, but nothing super major now, unless you're Bob Brookmeyer or Juan Tisol,
Yes.
like the great valve trombonist. But slide trombone is definitely the most common nowadays.
Oh, totally. Yeah. You always hear the adjective. I was like, but I never seen anything alternative to that. I was just like, maybe it just stuck that way. But yeah. So thank you for that. And the thing that I thought was going to be equally as interesting to talk about is the toys, because they get certain noises at it. And I'll be honest too. Like sometimes I always like sitting there watching. I'm like, wow, that looks just like a plunger. Oh, that is a plunger. And so that was the funny part too, is I wanted to kind of talk about that, like some
multi-purpose.
Yeah, some person. Right, yeah, it's good to have on occasion. But somebody somewhere must have just said, "I need this noise," and maybe they were missing something. It was like, "Shit, give me the plunger," and like it worked, and now it's
like standard.
Yeah.
What's interesting about that is I think it's pretty specific to jazz in particular.
Sure.
Because there's. In the classical world, like there are mutes. Like we do use mutes in like the classical world, but in that world, the particular onus is on purity of sound.
Yeah.
Like you're always trying to get this pure sound. Whereas like in the jazz world, one thing that I find super interesting is it's more about like the nuance you can get, and you hear that in jazz singers, and I think like a lot of the times when we're playing, especially a brass instrument, we're trying to mimic the human voice.
Interesting.
So like, and you hear like a lot of the jazz singers that are slipping and sliding around, and then you hear the brass players. What are they doing? They're slipping and sliding around.
Yeah.
That's why we use vibrato.
Yep.
But yeah, like so. Okay, you get this like you've heard.
Yeah, it does that like wah-wah type thing.
Yeah, and same thing with this. This is like if you've ever watched cartoons.
That's amazing. Yeah.
That kind of stuff. But
So what is this called?
This is called a Harmon mute or a bubble mute.
Okay. So that was where the mute was coming from. And then
Yes.
do you call this a plunger or do you call it a mute?
No, it's just a plunger.
Okay.
I mean, you can mute yourself, but
Sure.
but yeah, that's just a plunger.
Got it.
So.
I didn't know if it would, like, bro, don't call it a plunger. Come up with another name. Like, a rubber mute.
But yeah, like these, we use these to add interest to the sound. Like I also teach, and one thing I tell my students is like if the human ear needs to hear changes in sound a lot, otherwise it gets bored.
Sure.
So like if you're any sort of change you can introduce it's going to keep the ear interested longer.
Totally.
So like and that's why I love these kinds of things, so
Yeah, I actually had on
it almost does it for you. So
a neuroscientist who's also a musician, and he talked about what part of your brain does that.
really,
And it was such a cool talk because I was just like, just keep talking.
Yeah.
It's so interesting and cool because it not only just in a song, but even different genre, different style, and how actually what it comes down to is your interest in hearing different things actually is depending on how trusting and safe you feel.
interesting.
So when you are not feeling that way, you don't want to hear anything new or different.
Interesting.
Because that's just going to make you scarier. But if you're in a safe environment, then you're like, sure, bring it on.
Yeah.
And then your brain's like,
interesting.
yeah, I want to play around with some new things. Give me something different and new.
That's
Just
cool.
he was talking about how that might be why some people prefer like the same music their whole life. Is they
Right,
just
yeah,
may
yeah.
not be feeling good on the inside.
Yeah.
And it's just like
Interesting.
Yeah, it was such a cool talk.
super cool.
But anyway, yeah, that's some cool stuff. But so yeah, let's talk. So you have a plunger as well.
I do, yeah.
And let's
Target
hear an
brand.
example of that and talk to us about too, like where that comes in.
For sure. So similar to Ryan, a lot of it is based on kind of mimicking that vocal sound, that early jazz vocal sound. With slide trombone, you also get the slide to kind of help out with a lot of that. One of my favorite plunger players of the trombone world,
Right.
Al Gray of the Count Basie Orchestra.
Sure.
He was really a master, and there are way more than just him. Him and his son literally wrote the book on plunger techniques, talking about hand positions and ways that you can try to
I
get
was going to
different
ask about that
vowels
because,
and-
I mean, trumpet already difficult enough. That thing, I was like, how are you going to, like, you need a third arm. Like,
Yeah.
But I just witnessed it. You did it
For
just
sure,
fine. But
yeah.
initially, I was just wondering how the gymnastics of that was going to work out.
Yeah, well, everyone's got different size hands and things. I find that right at the heel of my hand is
Sure.
kind of a good spot where I can get. I think the biggest thing is trying to get a full open,
Yep.
or full close.
Yep.
You probably
Yeah,
know too. Like, if you can get it completely out of the way, that's really good, especially.
But early on, as a younger player, you probably drop your instrument.
a ton.
Yeah,
Well,
or be
this thing,
sweaty like
you
when you're at
lose.
a stupid festival that's 98 degrees, blasting sun. Yeah, but no, I mean, so even I'm sure that's part of the training is how to hold it, where to rest it, like how to make it so that also you're not just having your arms kind of go numb or your fingers go numb.
For sure.
Yeah. And that just probably takes time too. But
Hours of practice.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, that's right.
But yeah, anything else about the actual? I mean, again, gorgeous instruments.
So, well, I can say
It's more
About-
complex than I gave it credit for.
yeah.
just
Well,
looking at it farther away.
I actually sought this instrument out.
Okay.
In particular, this is I think his name is Frank Ellsworth Olds.
Okay.
He just made Olds instrument. He actually makes he did. He's passed away. He made trumpets and trombones.
Okay.
This particular instrument is called the Olds Super Recording.
Nice.
And it was made between the years 1941 and 1948, and then he stopped making them because they were pretty cost prohibitive.
Sure.
Because like all these intricacies here, like the bell ring,
Yeah.
this was very expensive and hard to do. Like the different kinds
Interesting.
of tones
They're doing
of
that
metal.
right in the middle of World
Yeah.
War II. Like,
Yeah.
not exactly the time for opulence.
Yeah,
but
yeah, and this horn in particular was built, I think, in 1946. So,
Wow.
and I'm the third owner, weirdly enough.
That's so cool.
I thought there'd be more, but
Yeah.
So
Well, I guess also the flip
Yeah.
side of that is that's your instrument. Like it's you're attached to part of your right hand.
yeah, it's interesting. Apparently, the original owner. This is interesting. We've played in this town, Coos Bay, Oregon, or a handful of times at least. And the original owner, like apparently, this horn was just sitting in a basement in Coos Bay for like decades. And then someone bought it, and then I bought it because like everyone I knew was like, if you can get your hands on one of those things, they're like, and it's super fun to play.
Yeah,
so
that's fantastic.
Yeah.
And how about the slide?
Well, this is probably my daily driver in this kind of style, but it's not that old of a horn. I bought this one actually in Japan at the Yamaha flagship store in Tokyo. It's a Yamaha 895 EN, which is Ejiro Nakagawa's kind of pro model. A lot of trombone nerd talk there, but
No, we love it. Thank you so much.
But I liked it a lot. It's based actually off the Bach 16, which was a very sought after American horn, and it's got kind of a warmer sound. A lot of like the older trombones I find can get really punchy, except for the Bachs I like a lot. But this super even throughout the registers, very easy to pick up and play. I think it's good looking, but that was kind of a bonus. After playing it, I'm like, this is pretty cool. But yeah, this is kind of the one I use for this. But I know Ryan can speak to it too. But having like a different horn for the gig, it depends on which gig you're on. And for something like this works great.
Certainly, yeah, absolutely. Well, very cool. Again, I would love to keep chatting, but I want to make sure we get the rhythm section up here. But Ryan and Mike, thank you so much for sharing some very, very cool details about the brass.
Yeah, appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us on.
Absolutely, thank you. And now we've got drums and bass. And what's interesting is like rhythm section, I again, not being formally trained, I think I was always thinking percussion and not necessarily a bass. But those kind of go hand in hand.
Very much so.
Like red beans and rice.
Yeah, pretty much.
Piano's technically percussion too.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, because of the hammer.
Right.
And guitar and tenor banjo as well in a group like this.
Yeah. Anyway, let's do some introductions.
I'm David Tyberg. I'm the bass player. Glad to be back.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm Adam Wolf. I'm the drummer, and glad to be here too.
Awesome. Yeah. So I didn't know if they were going to be as, like, there's just, like, these nuances to these other things, toys to put on the front of them and to play around with it. But there's got to be some really cool stuff to your instruments as well. Yeah. So whatever you would like to, I mean, obviously the bass is, I didn't know if there were actually proportions to it, but, like, it's so cool to look at, like, from violin to cello to bass. Like, they're almost, like, a third of the size of the other one, or 3 times the size. I don't know if that's accurate, but like it's just kind of neat to talk about that.
So I think that's probably got a lot to do with the physics of it. If you think about the length of a string on a stringed instrument, every time you have the length of the string, you go an octave higher.
Sure.
So I think that very much applies to the size of stringed instruments, bowed strings in particular, because you've got this whole family of higher and lower instruments that are related to one another.
Yeah. And then, so similar question, like, what was your path to the bass? Like, what was your kind of? Did it choose you? Did you pick it? Like, how did that kind of happen?
It was hard to say that it was by accident. I remember being a really, really little kid, and I was watching a documentary about the Ed Sullivan Show with my parents. And of course, they make a big deal about the Beatles' first appearance on Ed Sullivan. They come to the U.S., and I'm looking at this, and like I come from a pretty musical family sing-alongs and stuff, and I'm watching this show, and I'm like, who who is this guy who's having the most fun? He's got this big grin from ear to ear, bopping up and down, and sure enough, that was Paul McCartney, and I was like, I want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I'm like in second grade. I'm
Right.
far too short to play this instrument, and eventually I find my way to the violin, started taking violin lessons and playing in school orchestra in the
Sure.
4th grade, and spent the next several years asking to play the bass and being told, David, you're too short to play the bass. David, you can't play the bass yet. You're too short. And by the time I get to the end of 8th grade, I'm about to go to high school, I buy my first bass guitar as well, which at first was my major focus, was
Sure,
wanting
sure.
to play bass guitar. And at that point, people kind of gave up and they were like, all right, David, you can try. You're still 5 foot nothing, but I guess we'll let you try. So my high school had several basses, and they allowed me to take one home over the summer, and I just fell in love with, especially being a switch hitter, getting to play both bass guitar and upright bass.
What's the similarities and differences?
So they're tuned exactly the same.
Cool.
So a lot of the fingering is pretty similar,
Got it.
but you'll notice that the scale length is a little bit different. So the length of the string.
Right.
So you'll see on upright bass, it's a much longer fingerboard, so it requires a lot more.
Sure.
Let's you get away from the microphone. Whereas bass guitar is usually done with kind of a 4-finger sort of pattern, so you've got 1 finger per fret.
Sure.
But for upright bass, and particularly classical, which was sort of the style that I learned in school,
Right.
was a lot of it is 1, 2, and then 3 and 4 together.
Got it.
So the shifting up and down the neck is a little bit different
Sure.
mathematically.
And a stand-up bass is fretless.
Correct.
Yeah, so there's also that aspect to it as well.
But that wasn't so tough coming from violin.
Right. Yeah, I get that. Yeah,
I've
for
tried
sure.
to pick up violin a couple of times since becoming a full-time bass player, and I'm like, this is far too small. now that I've got chunky grown-up bass player fingers,
There you go.
it's hard to cram them back together.
I'm sure it is. But that's very cool. And Adam, tell us how you found the drums.
The movie That Thing You Do.
Oh, neat. Is that true?
Yeah, that's
That's
true.
fantastic.
Yeah, I really liked that as a kid.
Yeah.
It just kept happening. So
Right.
here I
And
am.
that, for anybody who doesn't know, that's more of like backbeat kind of 60s rock.
Yeah. It was a movie about various people from like kind of a small band, and they ended up blowing up because the drummer decided to change the beat. And I thought that was cool as like a little kid. I
Sure.
wanted to,
Be part of
capture
that.
the energy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
really impact music in a positive way like that.
Yeah, that's super cool. And then so interesting. So like you've brought in like it's a snare and some other toys, we'll say.
Yeah.
And then there's obviously a more full kit and that kind
Yeah.
of stuff. Anything you want to share about like either your kit or the way that they are often like the interesting aspects of a drum kit?
Yeah, the drum sets changed dramatically over the years. Like if you look back in 1920s, like Warren Baby Dodd's drum set looks a lot different than Vinnie Colaiuta's
Sure.
drum kit, right? It's just apples and oranges at this point.
Mm-hmm.
But, a lot of times it was called a trap kit, and you'll find that there's more almost like Foley style instruments involved because they were used in theaters to play along with movies.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So you have things like a wood block. In other like major cases, you have like a xylophone, glockenspiel.
Yep. I didn't think of that, but I guess that makes a ton of sense. Where like they were creating some of the noise for a silent movie.
Yeah.
Whether
Yeah,
it was
like a horse
footsteps or
Yeah.
or just simply setting the mood.
slamming a door.
Right.
you know?
Then other drummers were probably like, "Give me that. That makes a cool noise."
Yeah.
That's awesome. And again, back to the gorgeousness of these instruments. So obviously the stand-up bass, all of those kind of like stringed wood instruments are just very, very pretty to look at. Is there anything to that the S-shaped hole? Like, is that just because that's always the way it's been, or is there something special about it?
The F hole?
I guess so. Yeah.
Yeah. I think a lot of it is tradition, definitely, but also a lot of it is kind of placement and which frequencies it allows at which speed to exit the body of the instrument.
Sure.
People look at it and they're especially like, that must be so heavy, and they don't think about the fact that it's
Completely hollow.
It's mostly air.
Yeah.
And you're playing, the vibrating air inside, and a lot of that is...
That's a fascinating way to think of it. Yeah.
So you've got the sound holes make a big difference,
Yep.
and the shape of the instrument. And I just recently learned this: the varnish that you use on the wood
Wow.
can make a big difference to
Wow.
the sound.
So the movie Red Violin is totally full of crap. That's funny. Yeah, I mean, then you see, like even either hollow-bodied guitars or semi-hollow usually has that same kind of shaped hole. So, like I said, it looks pretty, but it obviously had some sort of scientific reason for it as well.
I guess it's gotten slightly less prominent with instruments like that as the way those instruments were amplified switched from microphones over to magnetic pickups.
Oh, interesting.
So at that point, the metal string is manipulating the magnetic field of the pickup itself.
Wow.
So there's a little bit less communication between the body and the wood and what you actually hear. But there's still some. It's still pretty significant.
Sure.
But it's a slight backseat.
Absolutely. Wow, this is amazing. Thank you guys so much for sharing all that and for bringing the instruments in. What we were going to do now was kind of pivot this camera around, and you guys were going to knock out a tune for us. Yeah. The hookers all in place and tuned, and then we're going to listen to some. You said you were going to do the Jelly Roll Morton song. Yeah. What's that one called?
Black Bottom Stomp.
Black Bottom Stomp. And this is a newer one that you all put together?
Yeah, this is a new addition to the set list.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, let's get things rolling on that.
I learned so much about you guys.
Over here, good.
Blocking out Spartacus back there.
Oh, you've seen the movie?
Of course I've seen the movie. That's a great film.
I am Spartacus.
I am Spartacus.
And I'm the same as you, Dave. Like, I saw the guy in the band that was having the most fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
On the guitar, and at that time it was like dudes like Eddie Van Halen that were doing jump kicks and things like that. Like that looks like a black.
It didn't stop me from jumping around.
No.
All right, we're all set. Whenever you guys want to let it rip, is there anything you want to give as an intro to this particular song or anything?
Not particularly. I mean, this has always been one of my. This has always been a banger. Every
Oh,
time
totally,
I hear, I'm like, it's been something that I've wanted to do for a long time with this band. So, glad we're finally doing it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Ladies and gentlemen, Blair Crimmins and the Hookers.
All right. 1, 2, 3, 5.
Ladies and gentlemen, Blair Crimmins and the Hookers. Outstanding performance right there. Check them out on the socials and streaming services and anywhere they play near you. You do not want to miss it. Thank you so much.
Thanks, man. Thank you.
It's all over now.
All right. Cue the song.